Welcome to the Adam Rothstein Hockey Podcast. This is your podcast for all things hockey. On this podcast, we talk about past history to the modern day and what you can do to grow the sport. I am your host, Adam Rothstein. All right, let's get to the show. Welcome back to the Adam Rothstein Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Adam Rothstein. So today I did want to talk about an alternate universe sort of situation of where the Washington Capitals go to Cleveland. In 1982, there were some financial difficulties that the Capitals were able to overcome, and they have played in D.C. ever since their expansion year in 1974. And now a little bit of a more backstory. The Capitals have had at that point a history of just being awful, and they didn't ever win. They hardly ever won 30 games during that time of the 8 years up to 1982, and they only won 26 after the 81-82 season. Now let's take the scenario that fans just don't want to show up for the Capitals. They went to the Bullets games. They went all there, and especially, for their championship in the 70s. But they're lucky if they can fill the arena halfway on those nights where the Capitals played. And when they went on the road, there was no Capitals fans anywhere in sight, even for cities such as Philadelphia, even though that's nearly 300 miles away. There was no Capitals fans on the road for them. Let's just put it at that. So there was a team by the Cleveland Barons at one point, but they just disappeared off the map, kind of like absorbed with the Seals, and then part of them became the North Stars, or the North Stars. They went with the North Stars, and then there was some player roster changes, and it was very complicated during that time. So in this 1982, the Washington Capitals owner and Bullets owner, Abe Pollan, is just losing money with the Capitals. He's successful with the Bullets, but he is just failing with the Capitals. They are having horrible. Some of them are they are the worst bunch of players ever. They are bad news bears, really before, bad news bears was even a term. They were just awful. They even had, and the AHL team was actually outselling them at some point up in Baltimore. And with this, in Landover, Maryland, they're like, we can't pay the state taxes of Maryland. We're losing money. We got to cut our losses. With this, I'm making good money with the Wizards. We can have more events here, but we just can't do hockey here. And in DC, and in reality, DC really almost did lose them because of financial difficulties. But continuing on, they're like, okay, the NHL commissioner at the time comes to him and says, okay, understood. And now he sells it off to the NHL at a loss. He cuts his losses. He's done. The NHL owner is like, okay, Cleveland just left. Do I want to give it a second try? Because they only had one season, really, and they didn't get a fair chance. Now, the Cleveland Barons name is still owned by the NHL at the time, and they go and say, okay, you guys are now the Cleveland Barons. you got the first draft pick of this upcoming year. You're gonna get a couple of stars on your team, so that's good. You'll get some stars for the next season, and they go on and they win the next season, and they win 36 games, and that's a huge improvement. And the people of Cleveland love them immediately. They fall in love with them, and they're like, hockey can work in Ohio. Who knew? And in reality, it certainly has with the Blue Jackets and Miami, Ohio, and Ohio State University with their NCAA teams. But continuing on, the Barons have a decent season, or just almost a decent season. They go 36, 38, and whatever 80 games would make it, and they just tie the rest of the games. It's not the worst record in the world, and there were other teams that struggled as well, and they found a way to win. They found a way to win those games that they needed to win. And this is still after the WHA expansion, too. And that also hurts the Capitals, now Barons. But they're in Ohio. Their big rival is the Detroit Red Wings because of the Toledo Strip. And they have some great rivalries, and they managed to win a couple games in overtime and that season, and there is just the people of Ohio love them, and they come out from miles, and on their last game, even though they weren't making the playoffs, they nearly sold out the venue in Cleveland, and that works too. And then the Cavaliers come along, and they play in the same arena, and they just have this historic run and the people of Cleveland love the Indians, they love the Barons, and they love the Cavaliers going forward through the mid-'80s. Then the Barons go on a record. They get this guy by the name of Mario Lemieux. Now, in our universe, Mario Lemieux went with the Penguins. But in this one, due to some records and due to some tough losses, and they crank out some extra wins and beat some teams, but other teams lose. They find a way to win this. They find a way to just get this guy who is supposed to be the next Gordie Howe or whatever, and on his first shift in 1987 or 1986, he scores on his very first shift, on his first few strides, if not anything, and he beats the goaltender of the North Stars, and then they just fall in love with Mario. Now, in this dimension, he is, let's just say Dale Hunter is the captain. He's just the big bad bully from, enforcer. He's the enforcer for the Capitals. He's on the team, and he's like, this kid's good. I'm going to protect him. And with him being on that same line, Mario doesn't get into less trouble. He takes more risks, and he actually, in this dimension, takes better care of himself, and he does yoga, and he dominates through this era from the 80s up until the early 2000s, and he's the only other ever player to get over 2,000 points other than Wayne Gretzky. And also during this time, during 1989. They get into, due to some divisional structures, they beat the New York Rangers, then the Islanders in 1989, and then they face off against the Edmonton Oilers. Now remember, we're not dealing with 1989 Laney McDonald. We're dealing with 1989 Wayne Gretzky. We're dealing with him. And actually, I'm sorry, we're dealing with, and the reason Wayne Gretzky stays because he just wins less championships. The Oilers don't get some draft picks. Grant Fuhr goes on to the Barons, and Tikkanen comes over, and Kevin Lowe comes over, and they get this other guy by the name of Messier, but Gretzky still has Coffey and Curry with him, and he manages to at least win 2 cups, but he doesn't. But he wants to stay because he wants more cups. Let's just say that. They come over, they play, they go back and forth. It's a Game 7 thriller, quadruple overtime, and Mario Lemieux scores the game-winning goal, goes forehand to backhand, and just beats the goaltender, and he wins it. And Cleveland has their first Big Four championship in nearly 40 years, and they go crazy for them as well. And then they begin their dynasty. They win 2-3 cups in a row. And then through the late 90s, they have their struggles, but they still are a playoff team as well. Now, Mario Lemieux does not get to 800 goals, but he gets to 750, and then he just dominates too. But yeah, and then he's got to pass the torch over. He's getting towards the end of his career. It's 2003. There's this weird kid by the name of Alex Ovechkin that they're looking at. They can't draft him because he's only 17, and he would have been 18 had he been born 2 weeks sooner, 2-3 weeks sooner. And due to this technicality, they can't draft him yet. However, they, with Gary Bettman as commissioner, they find a way. They say, "Hey, we're gonna get this guy. We'll find a way to pay. We'll find a way to pay the Sabres, or we'll find a way to pay whoever, the Panthers, and just say, hey, we want this guy. We'll give up 2 draft picks for him. We really think he's going to be the next big star. Do you want to? Does this work for you, Florida?" And the Panthers are like, "All right, we'll do it." Like, they take the bite, and Alex Ovechkin comes on to the Barons. He meets Mario Lemieux, and Mario Lemieux passes the torch to him, and in 2006, he comes to they have this final game, and even though they're not going to the playoffs, that time has passed. They find a way to just have the best night, and they dominate with a 5-0 victory over the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they just say, and then they say sayonara, and then a few years later, Mario Lemieux is inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he still works with the Barons, and Ovechkin learned some great things from him in his final seasons. He takes that. Then Ovechkin wins in 2010 against the Chicago Blackhawks, and some weirdos by the name of Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews. And with that, they they go on a dominance. They win in 2010. They win in 2013. They win in 2015. They have this huge dominance, and the state of Ohio is taken seriously. They don't have to be laughed at of the Browns. They don't have to be. The Browns are still a laughing stock, but they're like, hey, we got hockey here. We're dominating. And even though LeBron left, we have this Russian Alex Ovechkin. We're so awesome, sort of thing, And then in 2016, they just do not get into the Stanley Cup Final. The Flyers find a way to get in there, and then they have to go up against the LA Kings. But it's okay. Because the Indians win it in Ohio, and they dominate. So there is that. And then Alex Ovechkin becomes the franchise leader in goals, and he becomes the second most, and he gets 800 goals by 2021. He gets that, and because there's no lockout in 2005, and everything's all aligned, and I forgot to mention this in the 2005-2006 NHL season. They find a way to just avoid any lockout, and because Mario Lemieux was finishing up, they had to get this done. They had to get it done for Mario, and Mario was like, "We'll come to the table. We'll find something," and he gets it done to cement his legacy. So I forgot to mention that. So he gets that done. Ovechkin becomes the third player to score 800 goals. He passes Gordie Howe that season, and then only Wayne Gretzky is ahead of him with 894 goals. That's it with him. And he's only 36 or 37 years old, and he's got time. And then he scores 50 goals, and then he's only 30 away, and then he beats him, and he becomes the first player in the following season to score 900 goals in his career. And he would not get to 1,000. He would finish with 925 due to injuries and building a legacy. So 2 legacies are built in the state of Ohio, and then that's it too. But yeah, the Washington Capitals not ever existing is very weird. I mean, yeah, but that was still, I thought that was a pretty good story right off the cuff. Let me know what you think. The Washington Capitals winning in 2018 with their only Stanley Cup, it does seem a bit weird too. They find this out right there, and they have to just, and honestly, I don't think had the expansion been with 2 teams, I think they would have had to give up someone. They would have had to give up Backstrom. They would have had to give up Holtby. They would have had to give up someone, and they probably do not get past the Penguins. The only reason they got past the Penguins in 2018 was because Matt Murray was in net, and he was not prepped to handle Ovechkin and Backstrom. He didn't know the Capitals. He was not as well versed as Marc-Andre Fleury was with their systems. And because of that, the Capitals advanced, and they defeated the Golden Knights. And I do think it's a bit of a shame that Washington just only has this with the Ovechkin era, and it's a shame. And when I was making this alternate hockey history, I wanted to give the Barons, some dynasties, and I worked in the Chicago Blackhawks dynasty because, of course I did. Ovechkin's still dominant. He could work in this one. He works with anyone. He learned a lot from Mario Lemieux, and that pushed him so much during that time to go on that, and he just becomes the dominant force. And of course, now he's going to be beating Ovechkin in reality, so I had to add that in too. Back, but I think it's just a little sooner because of that lockout. He would get maybe 60 goals that season had it happened, and his father doesn't die in this. He gets more. He doesn't have any injuries because he learns from Mario, because that's what he went through, and he learns to avoid it and just play smart from him. For that. So, yeah. Very interesting episode. I wanted to give this a try. I did not really want to talk about what was going on in hockey news, and things are still up in the air, and we still have a few weeks before the season begins. But if you like this episode, please rate it on Spotify, Apple, write me a little review, and of course, check out the links in the show notes or description. Peace out.